I'm going to call this pattern the black and gold. I'm tying it very small, so I'm going to be careful with my thread wraps. I've got a size 18 jig hook in the vise with a 3/32 bead, tungsten bead that's nickel colored. The pattern originally, at least the ones that I've tied up before, have been called the tan and black. I decided to use some gold antron this time instead of the tan antron, and hence you end up with the black and gold. Very effective fly pattern. Not a lot to it. It doesn't need to be. I mean, you don't have to have a gaudy fly in order for it to be a good and solid fly. I've got some 0.01 lead here that I'm going to secure to the top of my hook. And then as I start moving down a little bit, I'm going to kind of wiggle it back and forth, which will stretch it out to the breaking point, just like that. That's going to just give us a little bit more weight up front, but it's also going to help us create a taper and help kind of get our bead solidly in place. So the first material we're going to turn to, or we're going to put a tail on this, and I'm just going to turn to a Coq de Leon feather. This one is well used. It's tan with some speckle, and that's really what I'm looking for, is kind of the speckle in the fibers. And I'm just going to grab myself off a little bunch of these and measure them out. I want them to be a little bit longer than the hook, so I'm going to try to use that as my measurement. And then we're going to come on back here, and we'll take a wrap or two on the Coq de Leon here. But before I secure it completely, I want to check and make sure I've got the right length, and I don't. It's way too long. So I'm going to grab up here, and I can slowly draw those fibers back and shorten that tail up to about where I want it. I'll be turning my thread counterclockwise quite a bit while I'm tying this, because it'll just help flatten the thread out. We want to maintain a pretty thin body profile here, and I really don't want to bulk up with 1.5 tons of thread on my hook. So with that, we'll just go ahead. I'll come on in and snip these butt ends of the Coq de Leon off. And then I bring my thread back up towards the bead. We'll just secure those butt ends down. You'll see that they'll lay down pretty nicely for us until I say something like that, and then one of them gets offended and decides, you know what, I'm going to give you hell. That's okay. So the next ingredient I'm going to tie in is just a piece of black wire that's going to be extra small. So this is really tiny. I want to try to keep this on the lens side of the hook if at all possible. That just helps me as we're ribbing this with the material, that I won't mess around with our tails quite as much if it's on the lens side. I'm just going to come on back. And usually I will slide the material out, but I wasn't paying attention, and so now I've got to cut it off. That's okay. I've got a set of scissors that I've set aside specifically to cut metal, because nothing will destroy your scissors faster. I've got a little spool of antron thread yarn here, and I'll take a piece off that's about that long, and then I'm going to divide it in half, because that's just way too thick and way too much material. So what I'm left with is something a lot more wispy looking, and we're going to tie that on my side of the hook here. And I'm going to just take a couple of wraps down the body, and then I'm going to pull on that material to get most of it to about the right length, that I don't have to cut much of it off. And then I'm just going to continue right back down the hook here, continuing to secure that antron here. So we're going to secure this back where we want the abdomen on the fly to start, which is going to be about right there. Of course, being OCD, those fibers are going to drive me nuts, and so I'm going to come in and clip them out with my scissors. At least some of them. From there, we're just going to advance our thread up the hook. We want to have a little bit of a taper here, so I'm going to work on a few thread wraps moving backwards and then back forward so that we can kind of build that sloping taper up towards the bead. So I've got about the taper that I want. I'm going to go ahead and grab the antron fibers here. I've got a little straggler. I'm not quite sure who he is, but he wasn't invited, so we'll have to clean him up at the end. And I just threw my thread on a bobbin cradle. It just makes it easier for me to manage, not having to try to continually weave in and out in order to avoid the thread. So we're just going to take this gold antron yarn, and we're going to just take it right up to behind the eye of the hook here, or right behind the bead, I guess is what I should say. And once I have it there, I'll go ahead and release from my bobbin cradle. Shorten my thread up a little bit because I've got about 1.5 feet of thread hanging out there right now. Get my bobbin cradle out of the way, and we'll take a couple of thread wraps right over the top of that antron. And we didn't get our bobbin cradle far enough out of the way that my bobbin just got caught on it. And it's only going to take a couple of wraps. This fly is going to have a tiny little bit of a black collar, so I don't mind it being black and a little bit thicker up where we are right now. With that, I'll just turn to where I have the last of those fibers tied down, and we're going to come in with our scissors and we'll just clip those right off. We'll turn our vise up the right way. Go ahead and grab our black wire now, and we're going to do some fairly open wraps of this black wire. It's again extra small, so it's, you know, it's kind of difficult to get the exact distances you're looking for. And it's very brittle. So this is our black for our black and gold fly. It's the nice pronounced black rib that we've got sticking out there. And once I've got that up behind the bead, we'll take a couple of wraps over the top of it as well to lock it and secure it in place. And just because I can, I'm going to take another couple of wraps here. And then I'm just going to put some pressure on it, pull it, then rock it back and forth. We call it the helicopter method, and it'll break that thread or that wire right off for us. You can't get it closer with scissors, even if you tried. So with that, we'll just break out our whip finisher. Put a 4 or 5 turn whip finish right behind the bead here. I'll grab my thread cutter. And that's it. There's your pattern. Black and gold jig head with a tungsten bead. Great pattern to drop behind a Chernobyl or grasshopper, a trailing fly. Trail it maybe, you know, 1 foot to 2 feet behind there. It'll drop down right underneath. I've caught a ton of fish on this pattern. It works very well, and actually my Chernobyl or hopper end up serving as my strike indicator rather than the flies themselves. Quick and easy to tie. Get yourself a hook and some thread and get to work.